So as you can see, the SLK is back in again. A little bit more about this car. I bought it with the intention of using as my main competition car. I decided that I'd like another little convertible. The choice was between this and another MX-5. I've built two NA MX-5s now with JZs in. One had a 1J non-VVT, 500 horsepower. The thing was phenomenal. The following one, I went down the 2J NA route. Bought three engines. All of them were dead before they went in the car. Blew up a gearbox, blew up a turbo. Learned my lesson with cheap parts, second-hand parts, anything untested really. You know, I won't be going down that route again. I mean, obviously, except for an engine, you're kind of stuck with that. You've got to just take your chances and hope you get a good one. But yeah, the choice was between this and another Mark 1 MX-5. I know how the MX-5s go together. I know what parts work, what components I can make fit, how they drive. So that was an advantage. The disadvantage is that the car would have had to have been built in one go, if you like. So complete engine package in, stock twins wouldn't fit, so standard management wouldn't work, so it would have been a case of link management, turbo manifold, injectors, inlet manifold, the whole lot. So trying to get back out driving again in any kind of sensible time frame would have been pretty much impossible. With the SLK, they've got the 2.3 litre supercharged engine in. They're 6-speed manual. I'm not sure how strong the different shafts are, but I'm assuming they'll put up with at least stock power and abuse. So I made the choice to go down this route. The intention was to use it as my main competition car, but I think the S13 is a better route for me. I wanted to do a YouTube channel, and an S13 obviously gives plenty of content, being a sort of chassis up build, versus this I'd already got to this stage before I started to do the channel. So I gave a rough summary before I go into a little bit more detail this time. Heaviest bonnet in the world that has to be replaced with fiberglass. You can get them from a company that does the silhouette race car body kits relatively reasonably. I'm going to go fiberglass boot lid as well because that's rotten and heavy. So 2.3 litre supercharged engine, cheap induction kit, pulley upgrade, remap, decat, stainless exhaust. Power wise, that's it. So whatever it spits out for now is whatever it spits out. I'm sure it'll be enough to get me around the track. I mean, you know, a standard S14 is enough to drift T-side with the correct tyre pressure and right size tyres. So this should get round any track in the UK and get me back out there again for now. It is full competition spec, as in the cage, twin door bars, full welding cage made by myself. Did all the bends myself, the lot. Obviously the standard sort of interior bits, hydraulic handbrake, dish steering wheel with snap off Boss, handheld fire extinguisher. It's got the plumbed in fire extinguisher at the back. Battery relocated to the rear just to put a bit more weight over the back. The cut-offs I haven't wired in yet, so they need to be done. They are all there. You can see that. Needs a good clean. So yeah, the next thing is to just finish up the little fiddles. It needs brake lines. I managed to salvage some flexies off a car I pulled to bits recently. Had a Honda Civic Type S that went to scrap, so I managed to pull some nice braided flexi lines off that. Hopefully they're the right fitment both ends, if not I'll have to buy new. I'm just going to do a couple of hard lines between the flexies just to keep the cost down for now. The priority is obviously the S chassis. I'd like to get further with that. Having said that, I've got absolutely no problem with spending some money on this if it proves to be okay, which I think it will. There's no reason why it won't be at least as good as an MX-5, because it's only 25mm longer, but the wheelbase is about 300mm longer from memory, so it should be more stable. I should be able to get it down to about the same sort of weight. If everything goes well, the plan will be to remove the supercharger, put a turbo on it, probably something like a GTX 3076R. Like to try one of them Pulsar turbos, they seem good value for money. Make my own turbo manifold, obviously intercooler and all that type stuff to support the turbo. Set of injectors, link management, and you know, sort of 400 horsepower ish, I would imagine would be quite a reasonable figure. The GTX 3076 should do easily 400 horsepower, around a bar, maybe a little bit less. So that would be the route to go to protect the plastic inlet manifold. I'm assuming they're the same on these as other cars with plastic inlets, anything much over a bar, and they tend to split, so it does seem like quite reasonably thick plastic, but nevertheless I think pushing past the bar would be pushing my luck. Fuel rail the fuel rail is a system I'm not familiar with. The return and the pressure regulator are with the fuel pump at the back of the car, and there's just literally one line to the front, so I'm assuming it keeps the pressure in the line all the way down the car and regulates the pressure at the rear, returns back to the tank at the rear as well. So I'll probably convert that to twin feed with two pumps and single return, just because that's what I'm familiar with. Pumps aren't particularly expensive, as overkill for the power, but you know, it's nice to have the twin pump set up, and they would just come straight off the back of the tank. So I've created the list of to-dos and a list of to-buys. If you're new to builds like this, I can't even emphasize enough, get yourself a whiteboard and work from lists. It prevents the whole ordeal from being overwhelming. If you've got a list of things you need to do, you can just attack the list one thing at a time. Once the list is clear, create another list. It does just make the whole process so much more straightforward. So on the list of to-dos, got to plumb the pump in. All the fuel lines are there, they just need connecting to the pump and at the top as well. Brake lines, as I said before, I've got some flexies. Hopefully them braided flexies will fit. If not, I'll have to buy some more. I've got the main power cable because I relocated the battery to the boot, so I've got to join that at the front end and put an earth strap to the body. That's not major. For the rear, I need a firewall. That's probably the most involved thing I need to do. I made the roof so I can remove it in two sections. This is bolted down to the cage and to the actual bodywork itself, and that just have to stay there. I can run without a roof, but this will have to stay on, because the most sensible way to put a firewall in is the underside here going to the rear bulkhead, just to box all the fuel system in, keep it separate from the driver's compartment, obviously fill all the holes in the rear bulkhead to make sure no fuel could get in there if there was a leak or a fire. So that's probably the most involved thing I've got to do. It's not a massive job, it's just time consuming to make it look tidy. Obviously around the roll cage bars, and to make a nice tidy job of that, it will be quite time consuming, so I need to get a bit of steel for that. Exhaust hangers, there's none on the back. Steering angle, so the front end, extend upper and lower arms. I haven't experimented with this setup of steering in the past. I believe it's a steering box. So there is a steering box with a pivot connected to a rod which connects to another pivot which connects to the track rod arms. So I've kind of come to the assumption that maybe I could just extend the pivot arms. That would give the rod in the centre and the track rod ends more travel. I'll have to modify the front subframe because the pivot arms do end, I think there's only about 5mm clearance before the subframe, but I could chop the back out of the subframe, plate up the inside upper and the front with some 6mm or similar to reinforce the front subframe, so strength wouldn't be an issue. And if it's just a case of extending those pivots, that'll be the easiest lock conversion I've ever done. The clearance itself, I could just go for some spacers, but generally you can get away with 25 to 35mm spacers, and then it starts to feel a little bit odd. Saying that, I had 50mm spacers on the front of one of the MX-5s, and that worked really, really well. On other cars, I found the steering feels really strange once you go past about a sort of 35mm spacer. So extending the arms is probably the way to go, and again, it's not really much of a job, it's just quite time consuming. So that'll be the steering angle sorted. Apart from that, I think we're ready to go. Or we will be ready to go, I should say. I don't think there's anything left to do after that. I need to test that I've disabled the traction control, because that's another issue that I have to overcome. With most cars you can just disconnect 3 of the ABS sensors and that will disable the traction control. But with this, I can't remember who I was speaking to, but somebody said the speed signal needs to be sent to the ECU or it'll go into limp mode. Whether that is correct or not, only time will tell, but it's just a case of jacking it up with wheel spacers on to hold the discs in place and see if it hits the limiter. With what I've done, I've pulled the ABS relay out. A friend of mine had one of these and he managed to overcome the traction and limp issue, so it is doable. So we've got to figure that one out as yet. And then yeah, I think it will be good to book a practice day, which I'm looking forward to. And the other thing is paint. I'm going to try, I have tried a couple of different styles of wheel arch on the car. Sort of your kind of generic sort of Jun style, originally they were. But that doesn't really look fantastic. If you nip nipped in it, it sort of fits quite well, but decided against that. They look okay if you start with a fiberglass one and mould them into the bodywork, so you lose all the rivets and fixings. They can actually look quite good. Yeah, so I've still got 4 of them. I'll go straight back on eBay. And I tried some concave style things that are a lot bigger, just far too big for the car. So I think what I'm going to try next is, there's a guy in Poland that sells S2000 archers, and they look like they should suit the car's size and style. Fitment looks fairly kind of generic, so I'll order a set of them and see how they work out. I've decided to go for the green colour. That's Porsche GT3 green. More of my cars have been that colour than any other, so yeah, I've decided to go for that. I think it'll suit both cars quite well. I'm not going to do the flame design again. That started off as a joke, just sort of stuck. So yeah, green. I think green with just maybe matte black stripe along there with the DoriHero logo in, and just keep the car fairly clean and simple. Nice basic style. So the buy list for this first stage of completion isn't actually too bad either. I need to buy the archers, as I said before, the FRP bonnet, FRP boot lid. I need a new front bumper because the one that has come with the car is cracked and broken and looks like it's got about 3 or 4 layers of paint on it. And a couple of sets of decent fitment, nice style rear wheels. So I'll buy the same style as I've got the front. They're 18s, they're a Japan racing thing, so I might buy the similar style but in XXRs, because they do the 9.75J at a reasonable price. A lot better than the standard wheels it's got on the back one side. And the random mono block rip-offs it's got the other side. So it'd be nice to have all matching wheels. I'm going to buy 5x114 adapter spacers for the car, so I can buy all 5x114 wheels and they'll be useful for both cars. I'm going to run 18s on this, which probably a little bit too big for the car, but as it suits both, it's the best way to deal with it for storage and cost. So yeah, 18s it is. So looking at this again, I do wonder whether I can firewall back to the boot. It'd be so cool to be able to run completely roofless. But when it comes to sheet steel work, or any kind of steel work, it's way easier to make things look messy than it is to make them look tidy. So I generally go for the simplest solution because it's generally the tidiest solution. But I could put a piece of bent tubing underneath the boot lid and then come from here back to the tube to firewall back to the boot lid rather than the back of the screen, because it isn't much further to go. It's still a flat surface to firewall to, and I think that might look quite tidy. Yep, convinced myself that's the way to go, and then I can run with no roof on, which will be much better. Such a cool little car, I really do like this thing. It's going to be nice to tidy it up, get it painted, get some arches on it, make it look the part. One thing I definitely need for this car, passenger seat and harness. Because I built the car with competition in mind, didn't bother with the passenger side at all, because I just wanted to get out in it as soon as possible, and obviously not buying a seat, the budget can go elsewhere. But passenger rides is one of the things I love about drifting. I love going to practice days and having new people on board for passenger runs. If you watch the videos and you ever fancy a passenger ride, I'm going to be announcing where I'm going to various different practice days. I'm always more than happy to let anybody jump in. Obviously I have to sign on as a passenger wherever we are at the time, but yeah, that's going to be good fun. So passenger seat, another thing on the to buy list and to do list. So this weekend's video has been a little bit all over the place. Haven't actually achieved all that much, but it was more about summarising what is needed with this car, getting the cars in the place they need to be so I can get on, acquiring a list of parts I need to order so I can get everything here and ready to attack this car and get it finished up.